Welcome. My name is Lynda Cherry, and I am the author of the book Judah and Joseph Reunited, The Hope for Israel. And I'm joined by my friend Jason Olson, who is the author of The Burning Book, and yet another important book that we'll be relating very much to our study today and in future events. Jason, tell us about that book that you wrote as part of your dissertation.
Oh, the America's Road to Jerusalem, or sure.
Yes.
Yeah, my first book is called my name's Jason Olson. It's called America's Road to Jerusalem: The Impact of the Six-Day War on Protestant Politics, which I think is a quite relevant historical topic now because the Six-Day War in 1967 was um, uh, a previous war that Israel fought with its Arab neighbors, um, who were threatening to destroy the state of Israel, and Israel won decisively in only 6 days. But a lot of the buildup to that war brought many Jewish people and Christian people very worried about Israel's potential destruction, a second Holocaust of the Jewish people. Um, in that war, there was not as much of this global jihad or global intifada against the Jewish people worldwide. What's unique about this October 7th war is that we're seeing a concerted effort to kill Jews everywhere. And so that's something that we believe should raise the consciences of all Christians and members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who have any shred of love or solidarity with the Jewish people.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jason. And just yesterday, you sent me an article from the Jerusalem Post where rabbis were calling and pleading with different Christian denominations to come and stand with them as their brothers, which for me was very interesting about your first book that you just mentioned about America's Road to Jerusalem, in that you outlined how each of the different Christian denominations were affected or how they might have changed their view or, in fact, maybe focused their view on the Christian role with the Jewish people. And so, specifically, the book Judah and Joseph Reunited, The Hope for Israel, I had not read your book before that. And so this book, Judah and Joseph, really does kind of focus specifically on the two leading tribes of Israel. We'll go into more detail in future podcasts about the specific roles that they play as given through their patriarchal blessings. But that Judah and Joseph both have leading roles in the house of Israel. And the fact is they have to work together. Now, many members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have received patriarchal blessings that identify them as being from the tribe of Joseph, or rather through Ephraim and Manasseh. And so the sense that has come through very clearly through our studies jointly and individually is the sense that these two people, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, individuals within that church, and the individuals from the tribe of Joseph, both within and without the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, really need to join together in working for the restoration and for the gathering of Israel. And in fact, there are so many who have seen this. We've spoken in an earlier podcast about both Joseph Smith and then a group of rabbis in 1830 in Israel, before it became an independent nation, that group of rabbis had actually reached out to those amongst the lost 10 tribes. And they said specifically, they thought they were looking for someone from the tribe of Joseph or from Ephraim who could help them to begin the gathering and help them be restored as a Jewish people. So this isn't just something that is born to you and I as our own idea, but this is something that's been resonating down through the ages and prophesied by Isaiah, many other prophets, including those that I just mentioned in our dispensation of time, that this sense that Judah and Joseph have to work together. And that's our whole goal in coming together in a series of podcasts that we're going to be sharing with those individuals who are interested in this.
Yeah, Linda, I'll just add that not only were these rabbis that you mentioned, and you could discuss more details about who they are, and um, on the other hand, Elder Orson Hyde, who was one of the first apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he was reaching out to rabbis, including uh, Rabbi Solomon Herschel, who was the chief rabbi of London, an Orthodox Ashkenazi Jewish rabbi in London, and then Rabbi E.J. Lowenstein of Rotterdam in the Netherlands, also an Ashkenazi Orthodox Jewish rabbi. So it went both ways. There were rabbis searching for the keys of and the leaders of the lost tribes of Joseph and Ephraim, and there were Latter-day Saint apostles searching out Orthodox rabbis.
That's right.
So it went both ways.
That's right. Thank you. So today's podcast, we're going to focus on what is your lineage or the promises made to the fathers. Specifically, what does it mean to be from a certain tribe of Israel? And what are the responsibilities for that tribe? Well, I am a convert to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I was actually raised as an evangelical Christian. And I received my patriarchal blessing a year after I was baptized. I received my blessing at the age of 18.
Hmm.
And I knew very, very little going in about what a patriarchal blessing was and what its purpose was. But in my particular patriarchal blessing, it spends a fair amount of time talking about the fact that I'm a direct descendant of Abraham, and it also identifies that I'm from the tribe of Ephraim. Now, one of the most important things for us to understand about a patriarchal blessing is that really the whole purpose of a patriarchal blessing is to identify our lineage and which tribe we belong to. It's not just, it's not just some sort of ethereal kind of projection. It's a very serious assignment because each of the tribes of Israel under Father Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, received a patriarchal blessing that was not meant for that person, that individual alone, but for their entire generations that would follow after them. We kind of see some of that in the JST Genesis 50 and also in the Book of Mormon, where Lehi talks about Joseph of Egypt prophesying about certain individuals within his own posterity that would have important roles to play, which includes Joseph Smith. But we'll get more into that later. But for me at that time, as an 18-year-old, I really had so little understanding of what it meant to be a child of Abraham, and even more so, what did it mean to be from the tribe of Ephraim? And in fact, because I was raised as an evangelical and I had been quite a faithful Christian and quite a faithful Bible reader, my
Mm,
understanding of what it meant to be adopted into Abraham's family came from Paul's writings in the New Testament, where
mm,
Paul was comparing someone who'd come into the gospel and was baptized in the name of Jesus Christ, that they joined the covenant family of Israel and that they were, in essence, privileged to receive the same covenants that a Jew did. But my understanding of being part of Abraham's family did not really go very far beyond that.
okay.
It was later as I grew older and did more studies within the scriptures, the LDS scriptures, particularly the Pearl of Great Price and the Book of Abraham, that I came to understand the importance that being a descendant of Abraham meant that I was a child of the covenant, and what the covenant meant. A very, very little emphasis, if any at all, was given to the term covenant or covenant family as I was growing up and attending various Christian churches. But I suspect that you, being of Jewish descent, you had probably a strong view of what it meant to be a descendant of Abraham.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Linda. I think that's such a fascinating story of how you thought about this question as an evangelical Christian, and then as your ideas began being shaped by the Restoration, and this idea of that there's 12 tribes, and that each member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints can come into each the 12 distinct tribes, and that each distinct tribe has its own unique mission and unique nature, which I think is important and puts us in dialogue with Judaism in a very beautiful and expansive way, that other forms of Christianity don't necessarily have. For me, being raised as a Jewish person, being a descendant of Abraham is very direct. It is traced by lineage, in the sense that um, uh, when God promises Abraham that his descendants will be as numerous as the sands of the sea and as the stars of the heavens, it's talking about his actual children. Abraham, as a father, which is tied into his Hebrew name, is concerned and wants a promise and a covenant from God that his children, that his actual family, will be part of this covenant. And so, one thing that I would say that that kind of separates but also dovetails Judaism and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is Judaism is very focused on using religion and using covenant to build an eternal people, because the entire Jewish people is of Abraham. It is part of the Abrahamic covenant, that the people, the eternal people, and God's covenant with and promise with Abraham makes the Jewish people an eternal people. In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it's much more focused on the eternal family. Each family unit, a mother, a father, and their children, that family unit that kneels before the altar in our holy temples, that family unit is an eternal family. But and that family unit receives the promises of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's actually what the sealers say to us in the temple as we kneel before the altar, and to a husband and his wife, promising that family unit the blessings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But what about the blessings to an eternal people? So that's a theme that I think we'll come back to as we try to understand how the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Jewish people think about the covenant of Abraham.
Right. Thank you. And in fact, I should say that in terms of being raised as a Christian, we pretty much viewed, quote unquote, the children of Abraham as only being the Jews. And part of that is because the Jews are the ones of the 12 tribes who did remember that they're a covenant people. The rest of the tribes not only became, quote unquote, lost, in other words, from their geographical home, but they lost the remembrance of what it was to be a covenant family and what it was to be Israel. So, for example, even today, when people talk about the ancient feast days, they almost always refer to them as the Jewish feast days, whereas in fact, those feast days were given under covenant and part of the covenant at Mount Sinai to all of the tribes of Israel and to any strangers who wanted to join with them. And so as we talk about this, and I know it's very important to both of us, and you've already mentioned it before, is that we're not just talking about two individuals. We're not just talking about tribe of Judah and tribe of Joseph. We're talking about all of Israel and the various tribes with their distinct promises and responsibilities. But we are also talking about anyone who wants to join the family of God, meaning that family of God is called Israel. All are welcome. In fact, you introduced me to a friend this last week who was born in Bethlehem and is an Arab Palestinian. And in fact, he revealed to us that in his patriarchal blessing, he was assigned to the tribe of
Ephraim.
Yes,
Yeah.
which I have to say kind of surprised me. And he mentioned that one of his siblings, in fact, was assigned to the tribe of Judah. And so his story is a perfect illustration of what we want to talk about in terms of becoming part of the covenant family of Israel, and that all are invited, whether they are of direct descent, as in your case, or whether they are adopted. And what does it mean to be part of the covenant family? Because when Abraham himself said he was seeking for the promises that had been made to the fathers. This is in Abraham chapter 1. We have to ask ourselves, what was Abraham's situation at the time? He was being raised by a father who was no longer keeping or remembering covenant, and this sense of what had been passed down. So we have to ask ourselves, what were the blessings of the fathers that Abraham was specifically looking for and asking for? In Abraham chapter 1, verse 2, he says, "And finding there was greater happiness and peace and rest for me, I sought for the blessings of the fathers and the right whereunto I should be ordained to administer the same." So the question that would come to our mind is, number one, how did he even know about these blessings? And we know from wonderful records, and many of them are apocryphal records. Specifically, there are a number of books that have been written by formerly FARMS, now the Neil A. Maxwell Institute, of the papers that have to do with Abraham and so forth, where there is a legend that, in fact, Shem taught Abraham in his youth and saved him in his youth when Nimrod sought to destroy Abraham, because Abraham had been a child of prophecy, very much like Herod tried to destroy the Messiah, Jesus Christ, at the time of his birth because of prophecies that had indicated that there was going to be a Messiah come. And so there are some records that say that one of those quote unquote fathers that might have instructed Abraham was Shem, the son of Noah. And so with that, then Abraham knew what it was he was asking for and looking for. And specifically, what Abraham wanted was not only the covenant of Adam, Enoch, and Noah, but he wanted the priesthood, which would unlock those covenants and activate those covenants. And it's through those covenants of the priesthood that the promise was made that all the nations or families of the earth would be blessed through Abraham's seed. Now, the reason why that's really important to me is because, again, my patriarchal blessing mentions looking to Abraham. Abraham's called the father of the faithful. Paul teaches us that when we're baptized in the name of Jesus Christ, we become adopted in Abraham's family. But what's important is that Abraham set for us the precedence and the understanding of looking to those fathers and mothers who went before us, who made covenants, and covenants that specifically regarded their posterity. The very first being Adam and Eve, who sought for the blessings of the priesthood and the blessings of the covenant to come down through their family.
Yeah, I mean, I just to riff on this, we talk about Noah, Adam, Shem. Of course, in Jewish tradition, Shem is Melchizedek,
Right.
and so in the Jewish tradition, Shem settles down in Salem in Jerusalem, and that's why Abraham leaves Ur of the Chaldees in eastern Mesopotamia, modern day Iraq, and he travels to Jerusalem to the land of Israel, because he's got to meet his ancestor Shem or Melchizedek to receive right here to the right whereunto I should be ordained to administer the same and the blessings of the fathers. But what's interesting is, when we look at Adam, when we look at Noah, when we look at Shem, they received Melchizedek priesthood blessings and covenants for their families. What's unique about Abraham is God, for the first time, is going to raise up a covenant nation, a covenant people, with that's distinct in history, and so. But this is where I'm trying to get at, is that God can make covenants with families, and He can also make covenants with an entire people. And so that's when we look at pre-Abraham, we can see that, right? And what Noah brought in the ark is a wonderful symbol. Noah brings his family into the ark, but Noah does not succeed in creating a covenant nation. That comes with Abraham.
I'm so grateful that you brought that up. And in fact, for those who will say, where are you finding this about Shem and Melchizedek? I want to say that in the CES Institute Manual for the Old Testament, Hugh Nibley speaks quite a bit or writes quite a bit about the fact of all of the legends stating that Shem is Melchizedek. And in fact, Melchizedek, we know, is a title, and Shem is one of the sons of Noah. Specifically, he's the son of Noah, to your point, who received the priesthood. That when you were talking about could the priesthood and the blessings of the covenant, which include the priesthood at this time, could they go to a nation as a whole? No, it was modeled for us that the priesthood, specifically through Noah, came through his son Shem, who we believe through ancient teachings is Melchizedek. And then it was Melchizedek who then endowed Abraham with the priesthood that he was seeking after. So why are these things important? Why is it important for us to know that our fathers who had preceded us had sought for these blessings to come to us, and about how we might obtain those blessings in the same way that Abraham did? Now, I know that the Jewish people consider themselves children of Abraham, and they also consider themselves a covenant people. My question to you, Jason, is what do the Jews in general think of the priesthood, which was tied to the covenant?
Well, yeah, that's a wonderful question. In Judaism, the priesthood is very much active and vital to the covenant of the people. What the Jewish people received at Mount Sinai, though, was a delineation of the tribe of Levi being the priesthood tribe. Of course, Moses and Aaron, both from the tribe of Levi, that tribe being set apart amongst the other tribes to administer the priesthood and to represent the people before God, and to administer and take care of any of the tabernacle and temple ordinances. That's assigned to the tribe of Levi. So we always see the reference in the Torah and throughout the Bible of the priests and the Levites, the Kohanim and Levi. So while the entire tribe of Levi is designated to carry out the priesthood ordinances, the children of Aaron in particular are the priests, the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, they're able to go into the tabernacle, into the temple, to conduct the ordinances inside. Whereas I think the entire tribe of Levi is kind of clustered or concentrated around the tabernacle and temple. And even to this day in Judaism, the rabbi will ask, is there anyone here that's a Kohen or a Levi? Someone who's directly descended from the sons of Aaron, or just that knows they're from the tribe of Levi. They are accorded honor in reading from the Torah, or a kind of an honorable place in the synagogue itself. Just the deference of priesthood coming through lineage.
Right.
But this does not mean when we look at Noah and we look at Adam, we look at Shem, Melchizedek, Abraham, right? There is this sense that there's even the Torah itself says Melchizedek was a priest of the Most High God in Salem. So Judaism is not saying that the Levites and the priests, the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, are the only holders of the priesthood. There's a recognition that, of course, you could find priesthood from Melchizedek, and in Latter-day Saint tradition, we believe that Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, also had the priesthood, and that's how Moses can get some of that Melchizedek priesthood. So the Melchizedek priesthood is not bound by lineage the way that the Aaronic priesthood is. Exactly. And I think even in Latter-day Saint tradition, we recognize that. There are Doctrine and Covenants 68 recognizes that the Aaronic priesthood exists even by lineage to this day.
That's such an important illustration as well of tribal responsibilities. In fact, people tend to be referring, in fact, to the ancient temple as the Jewish temple. It's important for us to know, in fact, Jews, people from the tribe of Judah, could not go into the temple. And even Jesus, who is from the tribe of Judah, Paul points out in the book of Hebrews that Jesus did not go into the temple because he was not of the tribe of Levi or a direct descendant of Aaron. However, Paul also points out in the book of Hebrews that there was a necessity in the change of the priesthood to the Melchizedek priesthood in order to receive the full blessings of the covenant. And I think Paul does a wonderful job of that. But also to your point about this sense of tribal designation and their responsibilities, we do know, as you've mentioned, the Doctrine and Covenants tells us that those sons of Levi will yet have an important role to fulfill in the future. We're talking about direct descendants of Levi and specifically of Aaron. In fact, there's a wonderful organization in Jerusalem called the Temple Institute, where they have had their DNA tested and taken, and through records that their fathers had kept before them, and then now through DNA proof, they are the Kohanim. They are direct descendants of Aaron. And they write that they stand ready when they are given the authority or the sign, if you will, that they are to go forward and start performing their duties. And they have reconstructed all of the ancient furnishings of the temple. And in fact, on some of the high feast days, specifically Passover and Feast of Tabernacles, they have begun to start performing some of the rituals outside of the temple. So it's really quite beautiful to me that both the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Levi, in a general sense, in other words, this is not every individual who belongs to them, still have a remembrance and a respect and honor for that which has been passed down to them. So when we say that Abraham was looking for the blessings of the Father, and we've discussed that he would have been taught undoubtedly by Shem, who is Melchizedek, what those blessings were. Well, he specifically also looked all the way to the past of Adam. And so oftentimes when we think, well, I used to think this myself, I'm an orphan. I thought I was the first member of the church in my family. I've since found out that's not true. Generations ago, I had pioneer ancestry, which included Hiram Smith. But at the time I joined the church and up until 3 years ago, I did not know that. So I used to feel so strongly about the covenant, and have taught about the covenant for years, that I always used to think, well, I'm a child, if by anything else, by adoption, but my priesthood patriarchal blessing tells me that I'm a direct descendant of Abraham and Sarah. But I always used to think, well, I'm also a child of Adam and Eve and of Noah. And it was very, very meaningful to me to discover that in Doctrine and Covenants 107, it discusses that Adam, in fact, called together all of his then existing priesthood leaders and family, and he blessed his posterity and prophesied even to the last dispensation. So that means that includes us. And what did he bless them with? Joseph Smith said this. Joseph Smith said, I saw Adam in the valley of Adam-on-Diamond. He called together his children and blessed them with a patriarchal blessing. The Lord appeared in their midst, and he, Adam, blessed them all and foretold what should befall them to the latest generation. This is why Adam blessed his posterity. This is still Joseph Smith. He wanted to bring them into the presence of God. They looked for a city whose builder and maker is God. Moses sought to bring the children of Israel into the presence of God through the power of the priesthood, but he could not. You referred to this earlier. We'll discuss it more in detail in a future podcast. But we know that it was the intention of the Lord, according to D&C 84. It was the intention of the Lord at Mount Sinai to bring his children into a full covenant relationship, to truly know him. The Lord said he would come down by degrees on Mount Sinai according to the readiness of his people. Of those people, 70 were able to accept the fullness of the priesthood and the fullness of the covenant that enabled them to come into the presence of God on Mount Sinai. But for many, they were frightened and they could not come into that fullness, even though they did say, we will accept the covenant, but they did it to the best of their knowledge and ability at that time. And that's then when there was the institution of the Levitical priesthood that would help the people to prepare themselves to receive the fullness of the covenant blessings, the Melchizedek priesthood coming into the presence of God. And so this is, again, back to Joseph Smith. Sorry for that segue there. In the first ages of the world, they tried to establish the same thing. And there were Eliases raised up who tried to restore these very glories, but did not obtain them. But they prophesied of a day when this glory would be revealed. Paul spoke of the dispensation of the fullness of times when God would gather together all things in one. And those men to whom these keys have been given will have to be there, and they without us cannot be perfect. These men are in heaven, these fathers and mothers have gone before us, but their children are on the earth. Their bowels yearn over us, is what Joseph Smith taught. So in other words, not only did they leave a blessing upon us so many generations ago, this blessing that we would be able to specifically receive all the blessings of the covenant, including the priesthood, but also they are still at work on the other side of the veil. And this is one of the most important reasons we do gathering on both sides of the veil and why we do temple work, is that to also unlock the keys for those who have gone before. As you said, the understanding is the covenant relates to families. Families as, quote unquote, my individual family, your wife and children being sealed to you in the temple, but also all of us sealed as a human family to our Father in heaven. So it's really important for us to understand that really on both sides of the veil, we have those who really want us to understand, claim, if you will, and embrace these covenant promises that have been from the foundation of the earth.
Thank you so much, Lynda. I would just add that when we're talking about Mount Sinai, and we look, I think if we look closely at the text, the entire house of Israel, all the 12 tribes assembled on Mount Sinai, they did hear the voice of God,
Yeah.
and they did come into his presence as far as their experience on the mount. Jewish tradition does pretty across the board teach that at that moment when the entire house of Israel assembled and heard the voice of God, they were redeemed from the fall. They came back into the presence of God, and so they were all transfigured in a way, and they all received the full covenant because Moses had been preparing them, and at that moment they were worthy. We actually learn right in Exodus about the purifications that they were doing the night before receiving the Torah in the first place. But the sin of the golden calf, is the event that enters in and lowers that exalted experience and relationship they had with God. And also the sin of the golden calf delimits the priesthood to the tribe of Levi and the sons of Aaron, because God kept telling Moses, I will make you into a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So there was an intention that all the tribes, right, and right, we could get into fascinating discussions. Okay, well, Aaron was the one who allowed them to make the golden calf. So why does the priesthood go to Aaron? And that's a very complicated question, which we go into, and there's many different interpretations within the Jewish tradition. But the point I want to emphasize is that it was the sin of the golden calf afterward which caused this, if we need to look at it, this kind of celestial experience to kind of descend a little bit.
Well, I will add that at the very beginning, when Moses read the covenant to them, they all said with a full heart, this is what we want to do. But actually later in Exodus, and I can't find the chapter immediately. I can find it for you. It's in my other book, The Redemption of the Bride, that they actually said, Moses, we can't hear the voice of the Lord anymore. You go up in our stead. And that together with the golden calf led to the belief that, in fact, what happened there, as you mentioned, the covenant promise. This is very important. I'm glad you brought it up. The invitation to covenant in Exodus 19:5-6 is that if we will keep his covenant, we will be a peculiar people to him. Or in other words, sort of like my one and only, my most precious people. We look at the word peculiar in a different way today. And I will make of you a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And that idea of becoming a king and a priest and a queen and a priestess unto the Most High God is really an important part of the fullness of the Melchizedek priesthood as it pertains to the covenant blessings. And in fact, so that's what we are promised. Well, Paul, in fact, when I say we are promised that throughout the generations, Paul, in 2 different occasions, reminded his people, we are peculiar people, and we are called to be kings and priests unto God. John, in the book of Revelation, chapter 1, verse 5, says, Jesus has made us kings and priests unto God. But the point being that they instead wanted to have an emissary, a go-between, or a proxy. Not for all. As we mentioned, 70 come into the presence of Christ, or Jehovah on the top. But the sense that they weren't fully ready to come into his presence himself is represented that then a proxy was made for them in the form of the high priest to go into the temple in their behalf and wore the breastplate with the stones engraved with the names of each of the tribes of Israel over his heart, and then also on his shoulders, representing the responsibility. So that proxy, as Paul points out in Hebrews, was specifically under the Levitical priesthood, under the Aaronic priesthood. And that the idea is for all of us to be able to come into the presence of God as represented by the Holy of Holies, through the atonement of Jesus Christ. Anyway, a little bit of a segue, but speaking of these promises have come down through the ages that are so important for us. If we're calling ourselves covenant people today, we need to understand what that covenant entails. And one of the most important parts of that covenant is to become kings and queens and priests and priestesses unto God. This to a nation who had just come out of Egypt where they were slaves. And it's almost like it's a promise that even then and even now is so hard to comprehend when God is offering for us to become joint heirs with Christ, to live with him, to wear his clothes, and to exercise his work in behalf of others. That sense of those promises, again, Abraham had said he would sought for the promises of the fathers, was also emphasized in the very last prophet of the Old Testament, which I'm sure means a lot to you, Jason, being of Jewish descent, because that prophecy from Malachi is one that I know that the Jewish people have yearned for throughout the ages, and that was also repeated by Moroni to Joseph Smith on his visit to Joseph Smith. But he quoted Malachi a little bit differently. That's in Doctrine and Covenants too. This is what Moroni said as that Malachi promise. Behold, I will reveal unto you the priesthood by the hand of Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he shall plant in the hearts of the children the promises made to the fathers, and the hearts of the children shall turn to their fathers. If it were not so, the whole earth would be utterly wasted at his coming. And I fear that particularly, certainly when I was in my Christian church days, this sense that there'd been promises made to the fathers that were coming down to us was entirely lost. The belief of all of the Christian churches that I attended was that with the death of Christ, the rending of the veil of the temple, their interpretation of Paul's writings about the law of Moses being fulfilled, it's as if that in general, most Christians just thought, Old Testament's gone and dead, no need to even read or study it, let alone be thinking about things like priesthood and priesthood promises coming down from the fathers. Yeah. And so this idea of Malachi's witness and Moroni restoring that to us, that we need to remember the promises made to the fathers, Jason, so we can claim them and so we can carry on the legacy they've given to us. Now, we've just started the Book of Mormon for Come Follow Me. And the title page of the Book of Mormon also refers to those promises made to the fathers. And I just couldn't help but think how much this must have meant to you. I'd like you to tell us and share with us when you read the title page of the Book of Mormon as a Jew. What were some of the things that stood out to you, and what did it mean to you to read about the acknowledgement of your people there?
Yeah, I'll just look at part of this here. So just from the title page of the Book of Mormon, right? This is Moroni, right? Writing the final thing that he writes is to try to let the readers know what the Book of Mormon is all about. And so it's an abridgment of the record of Nephi and the Lamanites. It's written to the Lamanites, right? Primarily, who are a remnant of the house of Israel, which is Moroni is writing this. He's wanting this book primarily to go to his own descendants, but also to Jew and Gentile, written by way of commandment and also by the spirit of prophecy and revelation, written and sealed up, hid up unto the Lord, that they might not be destroyed, to come forth by the gift and power of God unto the interpretation thereof, sealed by the hand of Moroni, right? So this is his final thing that he's writing on the plates before he buries them, hid up unto the Lord, to come forth in due time by way of the Gentile, the interpretation thereof by the gift of God. So, right, thinking of Joseph Smith, even though Joseph Smith is of the house of Joseph and the tribe of Ephraim, civilizationally, he's still part of the Gentiles in a way, which is an irony that we could get into, which we're, even as members of the church, are struggling with. Are we really Joseph or are we Gentiles? But even that's interesting that Moroni is also dealing with this tension. Talks about the Jaredites and confounding of the people in the Tower of Babel, a direct reference to stories in the Torah itself. But here, this is what struck me, which is to show unto the remnant of the house of Israel, right? This remnant in the latter days, that after everything survives it all. Both those who know that they're of the house of Israel and those who are lost. What great things the Lord hath done for their fathers. Literally, that we can remember going all the way back to Genesis and Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and we can know these are original great things the Lord has done for their fathers, and that they may know the covenants of the Lord. That's what the Book of Mormon is all about. This is number one, to know the covenants of the Lord. That's what we're going to explore here, that they are not cast off forever, that those covenants are still binding in these latter days. That's something that most other churches do not teach. And also to the convincing of the Jew and Gentile that Jesus is the Christ, the second mission of the Book of Mormon, the eternal God manifesting himself unto all nations. So a lot of people like to focus on that and try to reduce it. Oh, the Book of Mormon just convinces people that Jesus is the Christ. It's not true. It's also, the Book of Mormon is to teach us to know the covenants of the Lord.
And in fact, Nephi, at great personal jeopardy to his own life, is instructed by the Lord through his father to go back and obtain the plates, which we would call the Old Testament, or your people would call the
Tanakh.
Torah and the five. Go ahead.
The Tanakh, the Torah, the Nevi'im, the Ketuvim, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings.
That's right.
Right. These are all. It's the presentation of the covenant is the Torah, and the prophets and the other sacred writings help us to interpret, expound, and apply the covenant.
Beautiful. And Nephi teaches us from the very beginning that if they did not have those records that we call the Old Testament, that records the covenants, that they would have become lost. And because of his reading of those records, he teaches his people from the very beginning about the fact that they are a branch broken off from the house of Israel, not cast off, but actually fulfilling a role that the Lord had prophesied for them through their father, their ancient father, Joseph in Egypt, and that they were part of this covenant people. And in fact, Nephi proclaims that God told him that he, the Lord, had covenant with Abraham and would remember his seed forever. So this is at the very beginning of the Book of Mormon. And then when we go to all throughout the Book of Mormon, but specifically at the very end, we have Mormon again and Moroni emphasizing the fact to their people, we are of the house of Israel. We are part of God's covenant. And that as his covenant people, we have very specific responsibilities to fulfill. This is one of the things I love about the restoration, Jason, is that, yes, I loved the Bible as a young person. And in fact, I've often told people that it was my love of the Old Testament specifically that really prepared me to receive the teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Because it's in the Old Testament that Isaiah prophesies about a Latter-day Temple where it says sons and daughters from all tribes would be welcome to come into the house of the Lord, and where the covenants are restored. And Isaiah chapter 29 specifically talking about a book that would help to restore and confirm the covenants of the Lord. So these are some of the things that really witness to me of the truthfulness of this restoration. But I have to say, what has always been born in my heart, any teachings of the restoration always tell us the importance of the gathering of all the tribes, and the one tribe that is specifically named over and over again as a responsibility for the tribe of Joseph to link up with is the tribe of Judah. And this is part of our covenants, part of the covenants that in fact Judah and Joseph had together anciently, is this sense of binding of the children of Israel together. So I loved, President Nelson, when President Nelson was called, I just really rejoiced because I have always focused on the sense of what it means to be a covenant people. And he has talked about the covenant people and the covenant path from the beginning. In fact, even back in 2011, before he was the president of the church, he said, we are a covenant people. When we realize that we are children of the covenant, we know who we are and what God expects of us. His law is written in our hearts. He is our God, and we are his people. So again, as a Christian, I learned, I don't even literally remember anything ever being taught about being a covenant people in terms of any of the pastors or preachers. I certainly saw it in the scriptures. But even so, there was this sense that the quoting of the Jeremiah prophecy, Paul would quote the Jeremiah prophecy about a new covenant that the Lord would make in the latter days, a covenant that would not be broken. And so because of that, a lot of people were under the misunderstanding, and today even members of the church are under the misunderstanding that we somehow have an entirely different covenant than those ancient people did, than Abraham did and Adam did. And I do want to just share from the Gospel Principles Manual, very basic as you can get, that it says the fullness of the gospel is called the new and everlasting covenant. It includes the covenants made at baptism, during the sacrament, in the temple, and at any other time. The Lord calls it everlasting because it is ordained by an everlasting God, and because the covenant will never be changed. He gave this same covenant to Adam, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, and other prophets. In this sense, it is not new, but the Lord calls it new because each time the gospel is restored after being taken from the earth, it is new to the people who receive it. Now, I think this is so important. I know a lot of members of the church, certainly when I was young, I joined the church when I was 17. Most of the time they refer to the new and everlasting covenant as the covenant of marriage. Specifically temple marriage, but that is only a part of the covenant. What does it mean to us, Jason, that this covenant, the new and everlasting covenant, is the same covenant that has been given throughout the ages?
Well, right. We've been hinting at this, right? We have Adam, right? Adam and Eve receive a covenant because they're married by God himself, and they have an eternal marriage, and they have promises of an eternal family. And when we go to the temple as Latter-day Saints, the Adam and Eve story is the focus. And those covenants, like I mentioned, that those covenant promises that enable us to create eternal families of our own, to continue the pattern of Adam and Eve. And we could go much deeper than that, but that's we are, when we go to the temple, when husbands and wives go, they can receive, are promised to receive all the blessings that Adam and Eve received, we can receive. That's how I explain this to people, right? When they're trying to understand some of the deeper things of Latter-day Saint theology. Um, uh, However, right, there is also an Abrahamic covenant, and that goes only through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? And then from Jacob is finally when it branches into 12 tribes. And you really inspired it when you, in your comments about the Book of Mormon, Lynda, that the Book of Mormon really is this stick of Joseph. And what we're trying to do here is for Judah and Joseph to be reunited, which is our entire theme, right? We're wanting Judah and Joseph to be reunited. That we have an agenda. um, Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have to assume the identity of Joseph. And the literally the text, the scripture that helps you embrace your identity as Joseph is the Book of Mormon.
Absolutely. Love it.
Because in Judaism and the way I was raised, it was the Torah. We had a scroll, right? This beautiful large scroll. That scroll was the terms of our covenant and the source of our identity as Jews, as Judah.
Right.
And
That's
there are these miraculous gold plates, right, deposited in the Hill Cumorah. This is the source of Latter-day Saint identity as the house of Joseph. And it is a distinct identity. It's related, but the identity of Joseph is distinct from the identity of Judah, which we'll get into more. But it all starts with the Book of Mormon and the Torah. And these are the fountains, right? These are the roots that help you construct your identity.
right. And this is what seriously makes my heart sing. I have been so moved in terms of what we know in the Old Testament prophecy of Ezekiel 37, about these two books coming together, the scroll of Judah and the scroll of Joseph. Well, the context, the beginning of that vision, is where Ezekiel sees a valley of dry, dead bones. And God says to him, do you think I can bring these bones back to life again? God also shows Ezekiel that those dead bones belong to the whole house of Israel. And Ezekiel says, well, you're God and you can do anything. And God then tells Ezekiel the method and the means by which he's going to bring the house of Israel back to life. That's then when we have the prophecy of the two scrolls and the two people coming together to lead the way in this gathering. And so this is literally, I think, what impels both you and I for this sense to be able to share with our brothers and sisters of every tribe the importance of understanding the covenants that have come down through the ages. And with those covenants, not only promises in our behalf, but also responsibilities. So, for example, when Abraham asked God, why is it that you're giving the covenant to me? Why are you blessing me with this incredible blessing of the priesthood, but also responsibility? And God said in Genesis 18, he said, because I know Abraham and I know he'll teach his children. This is such an important part of being a covenant family. It means nothing if we don't know anything about it. For example, the sense that in the Joseph Smith translation of Genesis 9, we're told that the rainbow, sign of the rainbow, was first given to Enoch and then repeated to Noah. It was part of a promise to Enoch that the Lord would preserve Zion, Enoch's city of Zion that had been taken up, so that the people of Zion could help the people on earth. And in that promise, it says that when the people on earth remember Zion and pray and ask for help, Zion will come to us to help us. Well, we don't know to ask for that. We don't know about that blessing to ask for that help if we don't know about the promise and the covenant in the first place. The sense of The new and everlasting covenant containing it, if you remember, it said all of the covenants we make. So even individuals, someone like Lehi, who asked God to preserve the Book of Mormon for his Lamanite children descendants, God promised him he would do that. Enos later asked for the same blessing, and God says, yes, I promised Lehi I would, but I'm going to promise you too. Well, there's all kinds of promises like that are now considered covenants through family lines that are still going on today. But how do we know to ask for them if we don't know? If we don't know about them? And this is why it's so incredibly important for us to, number one, be students of the scriptures, and number two, to share those things with our families, to share them with our children.
Absolutely. Well, you just brought to mind, and we can get into this in future episodes, but we've been talking about the eternal family, which is what you're hitting at, and passing down the covenant through our family and our posterity. We talked about the eternal people, which is where the Torah and Judaism is going. But you also talk about Enoch and an eternal city. What Enoch was able to build was a city of Zion, an eternal city. And so we absolutely have this concept, I think, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I think it's why we organize ourselves into stakes of Zion. Stakes of Zion have this potential to become cities of Zion if everybody's working together to build Zion, to build a community, a city of righteousness, peace, and prosperity. And this is something that we've really forgotten, I think, also in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We have focused, as we should, so much on that basic building block of the family, the mother and the father and the children, and we have to, because it's the family unit is under relentless attack. But we also have greater covenants to build righteous cities of Zion, and even build an eternal people and eternal cities. And so that's why we need Judah and Joseph to reunite, because we each have talents and blessings as tribes to reach the full restoration, to work together to build these righteous cities, and to build these eternal people. And ultimately, we cannot build an eternal people without one another. I think that's the ultimate vision.
That's right. Well, we plan to actually have a number of podcasts kind of building on this subject and getting very specific about responsibilities for each of these tribes and how we might manifest, how we might fulfill those responsibilities. I want to emphasize, because it's often misquoted, the book Judah and Joseph Reunited, The Hope for Israel. Someone quoted it as the hope of Israel. And the hope of Israel is our Messiah ben Judah, or our Messiah ben David from the house of Judah, who is Jesus Christ. But the hope for Israel, just as the Lord showed Ezekiel in his vision, the hope for Israel is for the two leading tribes of Judah and Joseph to understand, to remember the promises that have come down through the fathers. By the way, promises that enlift and ennoble us, that can make us kings and queens and priests and priestesses unto God, but promises that also carry a great deal of responsibility. And as President Nelson has reminded us constantly, the most important work that we can be doing right now is the gathering of Israel. Well, according to the scriptures, Judah and Joseph have to join together in that endeavor. In order for that to be successful, you have brought up the idea many times, as we've talked individually, that there's no such thing as supersessionism. In other words, just because the church has been restored, it doesn't mean tribe of Joseph now rules the world and has replaced all the other tribes and their responsibilities and their covenants. But no, we work together in terms of what each of those tribes has to offer, and Judah has a great deal to offer. I just want to close with what you said earlier at the very beginning. Right now, Judah needs us. Joseph Smith, from the very beginning, from his very first prayer on the first temple dedication in this dispensation, prayed in behalf of Judah. and prayed specifically that they could be gathered to their homeland, and then sent the apostle Orson to dedicate that land for the return of the Jews. And Judah needs us right now. They need us to love them, to understand them, but also to have a regard and respect for them in terms of recognizing what Judah has provided, the fact that Judah has held on to the covenant for all of these generations, and to just go forward with love in embracing one another and embracing all of our Father's children in the hope of bringing them all to a knowledge of this beautiful covenant that was first established with Adam and Eve.
Thank you, Lynda. Thank you. That's beautiful.
Well, thank you, everyone, for joining with us. We welcome your comments. We ask for your comments and to share. And again, we'll be doing future podcasts that help explain a little bit more in detail about the specific promises to each of the tribes of Israel and how we might fulfill our responsibilities. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.